Imagine having the task of distributing the most aid money ever for a natural disaster responsibly to a government mired in corruption and under FBI investigation. That's what's happening right now in the U.S. territory of Puerto Rico, 2 years after two hurricanes, Maria and Irma. You have 91 billion reasons to care. That's how much of your tax money is intended for recovery. Today we go to Puerto Rico to follow the hurricane money and the fraud. In the small Puerto Rican village of Corozal,
Hola, ¿cómo está?
Brenda Rodriguez is still waiting for help. She recorded the frightening rise of the river outside her doorstep during Hurricane Maria. What were you thinking when you saw the river coming up like that?
That I was going to die and the house would fall apart.
Wow. 2 years later, Rodriguez still lives in the rotted-out home without a penny of the billions earmarked for hurricane recovery. She was surprised to learn she wasn't eligible for assistance because she doesn't own the house.
A young man came around and gave me an application to fill, and that's it.
The mainland United States government gave a lot of money to the territory of Puerto Rico for hurricane recovery. Rodriguez's sister is on the phone helping translate. Has she seen any of that money being spent in her community?
I haven't seen any of that.
62,000 Puerto Rican hurricane victims like Rodriguez have been denied emergency help for technical reasons. That's despite a record amount of U.S. tax money being devoted to recovery. A full measure investigation crunched the numbers. An estimated $48 billion for Puerto Rico will come from emergency recovery funds. $43 billion more has been appropriated by Congress so far. In all, it's estimated the recovery effort in Puerto Rico will amount to 91 billion U.S. tax dollars. Of that amount, we found the island has only received about 14 billion. The biggest single chunk, $5 billion, was spent fixing the electric system, which was already failing before the hurricane. Nearly $20 billion has been earmarked for housing and shelter under community planning and development, but 2 years after Maria, less than $1 million has been paid out. Omar Murrow is one of Puerto Rico's top hurricane recovery officials.
When you talk about how much money has been allocated, earmarked, or obligated for Puerto Rico, you're talking about billions. And then you're like, well, they're well off. No, that money, even though it has been obligated, there's not still available for the people. This is the drama classroom.
Murrow told us not one damaged Puerto Rican school has seen permanent repairs in the past 2 years.
This is the music. Look at this.
Oh, what is that?
That's, we call it comehen. This is it's termites. I don't know how to say in English, comehen. But
like their tunnel?
Yes.
Is this classroom being used?
Yes. And those ceilings, they were affected by a hurricane.
And obviously it rains in here.
It rains and it will.
It rains.
Exactly. Painting over the mold, but the mold has not been remediated. The mold is from the hurricane.
Man, we'll go ahead and put your water wings on here.
To find out what's wrong,
Secure left front, right front, and rear. Right.
we began with a helicopter tour of the 110-mile-long island, spotting dots of blue that mark homes that still have no roofs. Puerto Rico is extremely poor. At least 46% of its residents, 1.3 million people, were on welfare before the hurricanes. And what do we see up here? Alberto Martinez, a history professor and Puerto Rico native, has been tracking the slow progress on the ground.
Here we see one of the blue tarps distributed by FEMA to cover rooftops. These tarps were supposed to be usable only for 30 days, and yet it's 2 years after Hurricane Maria, and yet still here it is.
Have the blue tarps kind of become a symbol of what's been left undone 2 years later?
It's a symbol of the neglect. There's a bureaucracy in the way that prevents actual funds from being dispersed to individuals. Certainly contractors are making money, but individuals are not getting relief.
There are still a lot of homes with tarps, yes.
We took our questions to the top man in Puerto Rico from FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, Jonathan Hoyes. 2 years later, They're spending their own money, local money, to paint over mold because they don't have FEMA money or federal money to fix the roofs and to do anything else.
We're not happy with the fact that people, as you say, if they are painting over mold, are doing that.
But it turns out the biggest disaster relief effort in American history is also the most complicated. Part of the explanation can be found in massive protests against Puerto Rico's government while we were there in July. Fueling discontent in Puerto Rico is news that a number of government officials and contractors are under FBI investigation over allegations involving misuse of all the taxpayer money sent in after Hurricane Maria. The FBI has arrested 6 top Puerto Rican government officials and consultants. Also charged, FEMA official Asha Tribble. Once an Obama Homeland Security advisor, Tribble took the lead on getting Puerto Rico's electric grid fixed. Now she's accused of taking bribes to steer a $1.8 billion contract to a company called Cobra. Cobra's CEO at the time and a FEMA friend of Tribble's who went to work for Cobra were also arrested. All have denied wrongdoing. The FBI has arrested some top officials here and said that it's looking into hurricane recovery fraud. How would it be possible to steal or commit corruption with this money that's being carefully tracked?
It could happen in the procurement process because obviously for any permanent work that would be initiated with disaster funding, you have to do procurement. So unfortunately, in most of this recovery processes and as many other jurisdictions, we will not be exempt from wrongdoing.
What's more, communities normally fund their own immediate repairs and apply to get paid back by FEMA. But Puerto Rico was bankrupt and mired in a corruption scandal before the hurricanes. That means they didn't have cash on hand.
FEMA, it is totally agnostic to the fiscal and economic situation of Puerto Rico. So, as opposed to Texas, we don't have a rainy day fund.
Because you're already under financial management because of
Exactly.
your sort of like a bankruptcy.
Exactly, because when we came into public office, we were already dealing with 2 man-made hurricanes, fiscal and economic crisis. Those challenges on the fiscal side exacerbates even more the recovery process in Puerto Rico.
The program may expect a community to lay out initial money and get paid back for it later.
That's right.
But Puerto Rico really doesn't have that spare money.
Some of the assumptions we have about what a community can do for itself and how quickly they can do it don't necessarily apply, and that's where we all have to be as flexible and as patient, but as resourceful as we can be.
Both Puerto Rico and FEMA insist they're doing what they can to get money to the needy while making sure it's not lost to waste or fraud. Even without most of the recovery money actually in hand, Puerto Rico is slowly returning to normal.
We try to help each other recover, but it was hard. It was really hard.
For months, Mago Garcia says she cared for her mother and sister, both disabled, without power or running water.
I don't work in 7 or 8 months.
You had to close down this business?
I don't have money, no tourists, no.
Now she's been able to reopen the roadside business she's operated for the past 27 years. And hurricane recovery officials tell us victims like Brenda Rodriguez may yet qualify for some aid, such as cash for relocating to a more livable house. For now, there's just no telling when that might be. Puerto Rico's governor resigned over the summer. The new governor has announced plans to review hurricane relief funds and all government contracts.